Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Cam. The Iron Claw is officially in theaters and it has gotten a lot of praise from movie critics, from average moviegoers, wrestling fans, and non-wrestling fans alike. I have now seen the movie and I really loved it. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. However, as a wrestling fan, I knew a lot about this story going in, and there are some things that I had issue with. Now, before I go any further, I just want to say, like I said, I love this movie. Zac Efron honestly deserves to be in the Oscar conversation. The Oscars are more full of crap than a colostomy ward, but if they had any salt, they would at least throw Zac Efron a nomination, at the very least. Jeremy Allen White was awesome as Kerry Von Erich, and really, Holtz McClaney is just as great as Fritz Von Eric. However, because there's so much to the Von Erich story, there is a lot that was left on the cutting room floor, so to speak. And that's what this video is going to be. Talking about 5 things about the Von Erich story that were left out of the movie that I think could have and in some cases should have been included. Consider this video kind of like a companion piece to the Iron Claw, if you will, and I will be talking about some of the movie in detail, so spoiler warning, watch the Iron Claw if you haven't. But without any further ado, let's get into it. Number 5, The Forgotten Von Erich. When I was talking to non-wrestling fans about the Iron Claw, for example, Aaron White, he was asking me about the movie, I described the Von Erich story to him as the Von Erich family had 6 sons, 5 of them died, 3 of them by suicide. Well, apparently, according to the Iron Claw, the Von Erich family only had 5 sons. This was very odd to me. So, here is a little bit about the forgotten Von Erich, Chris Von Erich. Out of all of the brothers, Chris Von Erich wanted to be a wrestler more than any of them. He idolized his brothers. Unfortunately, the spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak, literally. He had brittle bones caused by taking Placidil, and from his asthma medication, he did in fact have asthma. But not only that, he was very, very short. Like, he was like 5'5", I believe. I'll have to check my math on that. But he was very small, especially for a man in his early 20s. He wanted it so bad, though, and ended up wrestling a handful of matches. However, it was never meant to be. He basically destroyed his arm while landing off of a drop kick. He threw the kick, and then as he went to land, his arm basically V'd. Like, as soon as it hit the ground, it just went like that, and it just broke. It completely broke. And it completely just destroyed him, and it destroyed his will to live. And he ended up committing suicide. He ended up shooting himself in the head as a result. Now, I've seen interviews from both the director of the movie, Sean Durkin, and from Chavo Guerrero, who did all of the wrestling training in the movie. And they both have come to the conclusion that there is only so much tragedy that you can tell with a story like this. And so basically, from what I can ascertain, the Mike Von Erich character was basically Chris and Mike Von Erich smashed into one. I could kind of understand what the director was going for, and I can respect the wisdom of there's only so much tragedy you can do with a story like this. But unfortunately, I feel like it feels wrong to leave out Chris Von Erich like that. So again, it doesn't kill the movie for me. I still love the movie, but I feel like Chris deserves a little bit of respect, like rest in peace and all of that. Number 2, Fritz Von Erich and all of his carny ways. The Fritz Von Erich character is basically the closest we get to a bad guy in the movie. He is the antagonist. He is not a like mustache twirling bad guy, but he is the straw that stirs the drink. He basically gets all of his sons to become wrestlers, despite Mike's chagrin and not really wanting to. However, there is a lot more to Fritz Von Erich that the movie just doesn't address. When Fritz was a wrestler, his gimmick was, well, how can I put this delicately? He was a Nazi. Now, The man, Fritz Von Erich, was not a Nazi. He played a Nazi in various wrestling territories. He even had a tag team partner named Waldo Von Erich, and they were basically a tag team that were a pair of Nazis. It was a different time. And slowly over time, he just stopped doing that and became a good guy, coinciding with him becoming a born again Christian and subsequent appearances on Pat Robertson's The 700 Club. So he became a good guy over time, and that element of his character was just dropped and was almost never mentioned. But when he was a promoter, he did a lot of very sus things, let's just say. Probably the most sus was that in 1987, I believe, on Christmas night of 1987, he was attacked in the ring by a group of heel wrestlers, bad guy wrestlers, and he was being helped out of the ring by Kerry, his son, when he faked a heart attack. Yes, really. And basically, because houses were down, he put out an edict basically saying that if he wasn't doing so well, just keep pushing it. Like, Fritz needs your prayers. He's really struggling. But then, if he was feeling better, being like, Fritz is doing a lot better, come to the show. But basically, he was using it to leverage into buying tickets for the next Sportatorium show. And honestly, I could go on for days and days, but Fritz von Erich was not someone to be admired, let's just say. And the movie does a good job of showing that in more of his toxic traits. However, there is unfortunately a lot more beneath the surface. Number 3, Lance Von Erich. As I mentioned, Fritz Von Erich had a tag team with, in kayfabe, his brother, Waldo Von Erich. And in the late 80s, because of David Von Erich's death and Mike Von Erich's injury to his shoulder, they needed another Von Erich. And so Fritz just made one up out of thin air. A man named Kevin Vaughn, who was a local in the area, his first mistake, Fritz's first mistake, I should say, and Fritz named Kevin Vaughn Lance Von Erich. He was a phony Von Erich. He had no connection to the family whatsoever. And what's worse is that the locals in the Texas area, in the Dallas area, excuse me, they knew about it. And they ended up going to the territory's booker, Gary Hart, and saying, what's the deal with Lance Von Erich? He's not even a real family member. Like, why is Fritz lying to us? What makes it even worse is that after Kevin Vaughn had a falling out with Fritz, Fritz basically went on TV saying, yeah, this guy Lance Von Erich, he had no affiliation to the family, and let's just forget he was even a thing. And just like, dude, you introduced him on your TV show. Like, what gives? But to make a long story short, the movie doesn't really address him. He's played by AEW World Champion, at least as of this recording, MJF, who was also a producer of the movie. And it's strange that he doesn't get more presence. But maybe there's some deleted scenes on the 4K. Number 4, world-class television. For very obvious reasons, the movie focuses just on the Von Erich family and not the territory world-class championship wrestling. However, honestly, you can make an entire movie talking about the world-class territory, and it would be super intriguing. But specifically about the television show, world-class championship wrestling on television was way ahead of its time. People think of TV wrestling and they think of like Hulk Hogan hanging out with Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T and Tuesday Night Titans. And yes, that was a very forward-thinking show. But in the early 80s, it was argued that there was no better TV wrestling show than what World Class was doing. In the movie, they talk about how they got a national slot on ESPN, which did in fact happen, but not until 1986. Long story short, World Class had a very strong presence in the Dallas area thanks to TV syndication. Their show was so popular, as a matter of fact, that even before the internet, the show was pirated and was seen in territories outside of Dallas and even into other countries. If my memory serves me right, Kevin Von Erich on the Triumph and Tragedy of World Class Championship Wrestling DVD, which you should totally watch, by the way, it's all on YouTube, he talked about how they were watching the show in like parts of Africa. And even some of the wrestlers got really big in Israel, to the point where World Class ran tours in Israel to promote it there. So their show got super big, so much so that for like a short amount of time, World Class had a bigger reach in terms of television than even the WWE. They were known as the WWF back then, and the AWA. What happened? Well, to make a long story short, in those days, if you ran a territory, you had to stay in your territory. And so Fritz didn't want to leave Dallas. He figured business is strong, so why leave? So in the short term, it was sound thinking, but in the long term, if world class even decided to take a step outside of, say, Dallas or maybe even Texas in general, we would be watching the Royal Rumble on the World Class Championship Wrestling Network instead of the WWE Network. And number five, the gun story. Kevin Von Erich touched on this in the last of the Von Erichs episode of Dark Side of the Ring, so I'll just summarize it here, but it really just made like a good, like, all right, Kevin suffered a lot, but I think he's gonna be okay. Like it hit home, basically. Long story short, in the mid 90s, Kevin was effectively done with wrestling, and he was really just struggling. He really was. To the point where like he just figured that he would just end it all himself. And there was a pretty sad moment in which Fritz, like one day, just like pointed a gun at Kevin and said, "You would probably kill yourself too, wouldn't you?" And Kevin's like, "Dad, it takes guts to live." And he just decided that he was just going to go to prison. And so he decided to go to a gun store and steal a gun. And he nearly did it, but the gun store owner knew Kevin. And so he said, "Love you, Kev." And Kevin walked outside. He took a moment and then he walked back in and he returned the gun. And it was just, and that pretty much just changed his life. To make a long story short, Kevin Von Erich is still with us. He lives in Hawaii now, as if my memory serves me right. He's got four kids, two of whom are wrestlers, Marshall and Ross Von Erich, and he's got 13 grandchildren. So, yeah, nothing but good things to say about Kevin Von Erich. Like the dude, like, seems like a quality human being. But that gun story just it speaks to his character, really. And the ending that we got in The Iron Claw was genuinely the best ending you could ever ask for, with young Marshall and young Ross having that nice father-son moment. But yeah, like, just, it really speaks to who Kevin Von Erich was and is. Ross is a real know-it-all in this video, but trust me when I say that I do love The Iron Claw. I recommend you all go and see it, even if you are not a wrestling fan, but just be prepared because the movie gets super dark. While I am here, I recommend that you all check out my collaboration that I did with my best friend Phil over at the channel Phil Talks Sports. We do a deep dive into the movie itself if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts on the filmmaking, the acting, the whole nine yards over there. Click the link in the eye in the right-hand corner. I believe by the time this video is up, that video will have gone up. But if not, I will push it out on my social media retroactively. But just stay on the lookout for that. But as for this channel, if you like this video, leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel. This is probably going to be my last long-form video of 2023, and then in 2024, things are going to get really wild. So you all stay tuned for that. But my name is Ryan Cam, and I will see you in the next one.